Is making video games stupid? Well, if you ask the people who make them, according to this headline, a near majority of game developers are looking to leave the industry due to mass layoffs and instability. Now, when I see headlines like this, I'm instantly curious, where did they get this information from, and is it actually representative? So I did dig into their sources. It's coming from this report from Skill Search. So before I get into the demographics of who they surveyed, who the heck is Skill Search? So they are a technology, games, and interactive recruitment company. So they're interested in the game industry from like a recruitment and employment standpoint, and they have been doing a survey like this for 12 years now, and it is published for free. Sources will be in the video description. Now, the first thing I noticed when looking into their demographics is that this is primarily representative of the UK and Europe, where 43% are UK, 10% Eastern Europe, 25% Western Europe. We do get 13% North America, but like 5% Asia. So there's huge game industries in Asia, a bunch in America. So this does seem to be regionally biased. So that's already one thing where I think it's a little irresponsible to just say game developers in general. That being said, I mean, that is a large portion of, there's a lot of game companies there. Now, of the people surveyed, there are actually, these aren't just like newbies to the industry who have been there a year and are burnt out. This does look like people who are in primarily mid-level, senior, or even lead management positions. And they represent a variety of company sizes, with 16% in companies of just 1 to 9 people, whereas 32% are in 250 plus employee juggernauts of companies. And most have been in the industry for at least 5 years, with 33% at 5 to 10 years and 46% at 10 plus years. So overall, a huge percentage at 79% of the respondents have been in the industry for at least 5 years. So these are experienced people within the industry. And while Skill Search does also do immersive as opposed to just gaming, the vast majority of responses were within gaming. So I think it is representative to that. And the studios represent PC gaming as well as console. And if you're like, how could these add up to more than 100%? Well, obviously some companies aren't just doing PC or console, it's both. Now, 35% are at mobile. Speaking of mobile, I've turned down every mobile game sponsorship I've been offered until today because I actually like Maddox and it doesn't have all of the issues I have with all sorts of other ones. I've turned down a bunch of mobile games because they're grindy wastes of time. I like Number Go Up, but I like Number Go Up when I get better. I don't like Number Go Up because I spent lots of time on the game or paid for some stupid speed up that in a pay to win element. Maddox has none of those issues. You are in competitive mind sport matches, problem solving. It could be puzzles, it could be logic, it could be math, and I'm a math teacher, so I like that. But you get a ranking system similar to if you played on something like chess.com. Maddox is great. 1 minute head-to-head duel. I can see my number go up if I get better, and I'm actually improving my brain rather than rotting my brain on endless doom scrolling. Also, like I said, no predatory monetization issues that I have with some mobile games, and I actually find the game fun. So there's all of that. I will continue to play it past this sponsorship, and hey, maybe you can even challenge me on there. It's social, there's leaderboards, there's, daily challenges and things, so you get all those dopamine hits, but it's healthy dopamine hits where you're actually improving your brain rather than wasting time. There's tons of research on the difference between a passive screen time and doom scrolling versus active screen time, problem solving, puzzle solving. So I find this fun. It doesn't have any sorts of issues. It's completely free to play. Check out the sponsored link in the video description and or pinned comment. Now, a little further on the demographics, I wanted to see, is this just talking about people within a certain position within the game industry? But it does look fairly representative. We have the top responses at art and programming, with design another large one and production following that, and then a whole bunch of other small roles. Now, it makes sense that it would be split like this, I think, because I think the just more positions are available for art and programming within the games industry. You don't need as many people doing product management, for example. So I think this does make sense and shows that it is a wide survey of a lot of positions within the industry. Now, I noticed this section of the survey that I think is worth talking about because using AI in games is such a hot button topic right now, with DLSS 5, striking up a lot of conversations around that, but just generative AI use in games. We see games published with AI art, and then we get a bunch of comments and public backlash, companies saying, it was unintended. Now, they do have stats about its use in games, but I actually noticed, again, because Skill Search is interested in the job application process, that some of this just sounds kind of dystopian because, I never even considered, because it's been so long since I applied for a job, that your initial screening interview could be being interviewed by an AI bot. And 69% of respondents feel very uncomfortable about being interviewed by an AI bot for an initial screening. And I couldn't agree more. Now, I understand, I think, why companies would do this because they get so many applicants. And speaking of those applicants, a bunch of those applicants could be using AI to just send out a bunch of applications. And 89% of respondents think companies should have clear rules for using AI throughout the application process, so that there's not like a mismatch of, hey, I thought it would be okay to do so, but then they didn't think so, or maybe they wanted me to, or whatever, right? So there should be clear rules. Now, getting into the actual use of AI in games, 64% believe AI has a negative impact on creativity in the industry. And this isn't just gamers, right? This is people within the game industry. 64% believe AI has a negative impact on creativity in the industry. Now, I think this is the primary concern a lot of people have with seeing AI art in games and stuff, is we're I don't want to see what some computer averaged out for the results in their training data for this. I want to see what an actual artist thought this world would look like, or this character would look like, because it has some meaning to their role within this world or within this story. So there's that impact on creativity. So the game developers, it looks like at least a majority of them are having those same concerns. Now, that doesn't mean they're all negative about the growing use of AI within the industry. 30% are at least somewhat positive, with 9% being very positive. So I'm doing 21 plus 9% to get that 30% are at least somewhat or more positive about AI use and its growing nature. But that doesn't mean 70% are negative, because we have 21% neutral, meaning that 49% total are either somewhat or very concerned. That's about half. So about half are at least somewhat concerned, if not more so, about the growing use of AI, and 21% don't care, with only 30% being positive about it. Now, I'm also interested in game industry, companies and their policies regarding AI tools and their use, because we see a lot of headlines about, this company, I think Capcom recently published, okay, we don't want AI use in, the art in games, or what is their policy of generative AI use in their games. So we occasionally see these published by big companies, but the vast majority of game developers and game publishers have not posted a public policy. Do they even have an internal policy? So it's interesting to get this survey, because then we get some inside look at what that is actually looking like within these companies. And then I accidentally scrolled down way too far. Now, 52% stated that they or their company have started using AI tools in their workflow. So I actually thought this might be higher, but it looks like about half. And that's them or their companies. Now, they're listing the top 3 benefits as, I think, the obvious ones. Increased efficiency, do more with smaller teams, cost savings. So when companies have publicly stated what they want to use generative AI for, a lot of them talk about in your production phase, you can iterate a bunch of ideas a lot quicker. If you can generate a bunch of placeholder art super quickly, you can generate a bunch of placeholder code to prototype some game ideas. And then you could do more with fewer people. And if you do it faster with fewer people, that does amount to cost savings and efficiency. So I think we do need to acknowledge that there is a chance to save a lot of money using AI in the development process. But again, there's that concern about what it does to the creativity side of things and the negative elements there. But how many of them even have a policy in place, or are they just leaving it up to the employees to decide if they're using AI or not? Well, 29% said their company has policies or guidelines in place for ethical AI use. That's only 29%. 31% though were just unsure. So sounds to me like a lot of companies might just not really have official policies. Maybe they're just leaving it up to individual employees. Now, the top three concerns are ethical use, loss of creative authenticity, and job security. Because, again, when you're getting at the benefit of cost savings, what is it saving? Employee time. And do more with smaller teams means don't have to hire as large of teams, right? So this is where we're getting into that. This is related to that, job security fears that's leading to a lot of these game industry workers wanting to leave the industry. So, now, this next section, like I said, Skillshare is publishing this research, and they're mostly interested in the job search, kind of, matching employees with employers, that kind of a thing. So I'm not going to be talking about all of this stuff that they post here. A source will be in the video description. However, for any of you interested about getting into the game industry, because I'm sure some of you are, is it worth it to get a game-related degree? Well, this stat does seem to indicate that that is the case, because how long it took to secure a job does seem to correlate positively with having a game-related degree. Because the people who took over a year to secure a job, 56% don't have a game-related degree, while only 25% do. Now, 25% do, which means it doesn't guarantee you to get a job within a year if you have a game-related degree, but it certainly seems to help. And also the people who secured a job before even graduating, 27% had a game-related degree, while only 15% didn't. So if you are thinking about getting a game industry job, it does seem to help to have a game-related degree. Now, I'm not going to worry too much about a bunch of this stuff. Like I said, you can look through this on your own time, source in the video description, etc. But there's also some discussion of relocation, because with how many of these employees are citing, layoffs as a big problem with being in this industry, because oftentimes that means relocating. So if every time a game developer makes a big project and then they downsize the team, there's a bunch of layoffs before getting into the next project, now you need to find a new job. Well, not all jobs are remote work, so you might need to relocate. Now, 53% would consider relocating for a new job, which means about half wouldn't, right? But they would need the right kind of package available to do so. Worries about losing friends and family, job security, cost of living, all sorts of problems related to relocating. But again, all of that comes into this mass layoffs being an issue. So here we finally get to where I think this headline is getting its stat from. So remember, the headline was, a near majority of game developers are looking to leave the industry due to mass layoffs and instability. I think they're generating this headline from this stat right here. 44% are considering leaving the industry as a result of redundancies. Now, if you're not in business stuff, redundancy means your position is no longer needed. So goodbye, you lose your job. Anyway, so basically redundancy is a nice way of saying you're losing your job. So, and not because you wanted to. Anyway, so 44% are considering leaving the industry as a result of redundancies. I feel like that's a slightly less strong statement than this one. They're phrasing it as near majority, so you might accidentally read it as majority, and are looking to leave. Considering leaving, a little bit less strong. So that's, again, another reason why it's important to look up the sources of the information that the headlines come from. Now, a bunch of people have been affected by these redundancies, layoffs, right? So only 35% say that they have not affected them or their studio. So even if you haven't been laid off, if a lot of people at your studio have been, then that does have an impact on you don't necessarily feel secure in your job. And you might see, man, I'm probably next. And you don't feel good about working in this industry, with how frequently these layoffs are occurring. 22% of respondents to this survey say that they personally have been made redundant. That feels like such a weird way of saying it, but okay, I'm just not in the business side of stuff. Anyway, they have been made redundant within the last 12 months. So 22%, that is close to 1 in 4 people who were surveyed in this industry have lost their job within the last year. And 12% say they were made redundant more than 12 months ago. So if you extend the time frame a little bit, that's 36%. That's more than 1 in 3. That's a lot. You see why a lot of people are concerned about working in this industry as a result of redundancy. Now, 28% say that their studio made redundancies, but they weren't personally affected. And 4% say their studio just closed and everybody is gone, okay? So yeah, that's pretty crazy. So 28%, okay, they weren't personally affected, but their studio was, and that's where you're feeling like you were safe. So wow, you see why it could feel bad to work in this industry with those layoffs. And I think that game development is really prone to these cycles of hiring for a big game development project and then making a bunch of redundancies when the game ships because you might not need staffing at that level at that time. And it makes jobs that aren't supposed to be contract work feel a lot like contract work, where you lack that job security and, permanent friends and family, and having to relocate can be pretty bad if you can't do this as remote work. Now, the top 3 reasons listed for redundancies were lack of funding from investors, budget cuts, or lack of profits. You could see if like a live service title launched and didn't hit a high player count, they can't support a large development team long-term, that kind of thing. Now, of those people who were affected by redundancies, 52%, so about half, but a little bit more, were unsatisfied with their redundancy package. So that's another issue. So if you were affected or people you know were affected, and now you're thinking, I might be next, and then you're also unsatisfied with the coverage you get, if this does affect you, then that makes it even worse to feel, feeling for working in this industry. And so how about those people who get laid off? Are they able to find new jobs? Well, it looks like only 45% have been able to find a new job of the people who have been made redundant. Now, how long did it take to find a new job for the 45% who could? Notice that means 55% still haven't found a new one yet of the people who were made redundant. Well, a good chunk were able to get it in less than 3 months. That would be 54%, so a little over half could get a job within 3 months. But that's only of the people who found a new job, right? 55% have not since found a new job. But of the 45% who have, about half of those were able to get it within 3 months. But that means a lot of them took more than 3 months to get a new job, and 8% are even saying it was more than 12 months. And like I said, only 45% have since found a new job. Now, of those who found a new job, only 27% feel secure in their new role. A lot of them are still feeling like they're just about to be laid off again. And then there's some stats on, are you earning more or less than before? Are you happier or less happier in your new role? Has your work-life balance improved? All sorts of stats. And then there's just tons of stats regarding the layoffs and studio priorities and all sorts of things. So we're not even halfway through this thing, but I think that's where we're going to end the video today because we found the stat that led to this headline. We investigated where it came from. Now, I'm curious in the comment section, those of you who do work within the industry, does this match up to what you've seen? And also, if you do work within the industry, are you considering leaving it due to feeling this lack of stability? all these layoffs, getting continually hired for one project, laid off when it's finished, moving on to the next one, maybe concerned about AI making it harder to even get a new role if you are laid off. So let me know how you're feeling about that in the comments section. Hope you guys found the video useful and or interesting. Don't forget to check out Maddox in the pinned comment and or video description. And I hope all of you have an excellent day.